you don't have the culture, that you're not going to be able to take care of those people. So I think this is a huge shift, post-pandemic leadership lesson, that taking care of the team, making sure that the healers are healthy, including yourself, but team checking in on one another is as important as what you're doing on the front line with people. Because if we don't take care of that, we're not going to be here to take care of anybody.
Absolutely.
September is National Recovery Month, so for this month, we will be focusing on mental health with Dr. Jim Barry. He is professor and chair of the Department of Behavioral Medicine and Psychiatry at West Virginia University School of Medicine and director of addictions. He's been interviewed across the nation, including the New York Times, NPR, and Huffington Post.
All right. Hey, guys, welcome back to our second conversation with Dr. Jim Barry, the Department Chair of Behavioral Medicine and Psychiatry at West Virginia University. Jim, we talked last time just about mental health and addiction. It's National Recovery Month, so thank you for coming back to talk a little bit more now about the workplace.
Great. Yeah, looking forward to talking about the workplace now.
I was thinking some more about this idea that you started in your role in May of 2020, right as the pandemic was starting. And one of the things that you realized pretty quickly as a department was that not only were you going to be caring for the physical needs of patients, but that there were many other healthcare providers who were dealing with a lot of extra stress, anxiety, extra additional loss, doing roles and responsibilities they hadn't been prepared for, and that the workforce itself needed some attention. And somehow in that, you all came up with an idea for Healthy Healers. So talk a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, really, that came to be. The genesis for that was actually before the pandemic. And it really came down to me paying attention to what was going on in my own life as a provider, and also in what I was seeing in my colleagues across the department, especially, but even across our whole healthcare system. And really starting to dive into the literature on healthcare burnout, and coming to learn through that deep dive that this is it really had become identified as a healthcare crisis. And the National Academy of Medicine, the American Medical Association, put out significant reports as sort of a clarion call that systems better pay attention to this, and really coming to a recognition that to what I came to believe and still believe, that our greatest healthcare crisis that we will be facing into the future is provider well-being and burnout. If we do not have healthy providers, healthcare workers, we are not going to have a healthcare system. And so began thinking about then and putting together a team of people that help me think about and then help our department determine what is going on and how can we make a difference in helping folks. And that was what I learned before, is that like 20% of doctors and nurses were considering leaving the profession. And that was before COVID.
Right.
And then after COVID, those rates just really went through the roof. And then you saw you already had this too, that doctors were at a little bit higher rates of suicide than the average American in the population, and nurses had even higher rates, and female nurses had much higher rates of suicide. And all of that has certainly been worse during the pandemic. And so what we tried to do then in the spring of 2020 is really accelerate what we wanted to do, because I just really felt the need, and watching how people I could tell that they were overburdened, and that they were suffering, and we wanted to try to do what we could to make a difference as a department. And so that's where we really started putting more energy into the Healthy Healers program that we developed to do a couple of things. Then is we surveyed our healthcare workers and our healthcare team, and it was important to us that we recognized it wasn't just the direct provider like the doctor or the therapist, but it was also the frontline staff, the people who were working behind the scenes, the administrators. All of them were part of our that we consider part of the healthcare team, and that we really designated all of us as healers because of the unique work that we are doing. And so, how do we go about recognizing what they're facing now? And so we put together a survey based on some national instruments that are out there. And then we also developed some of our own questions as well. And, that was the first thing was putting out a survey to find out what we could regarding what people were experiencing. And I'll tell you that, regardless of what was said in the survey, the response that we received from our team members was overwhelmingly positive just by asking the questions and trying to learn and hear from them what they are experiencing. And so that was one of those, aha moments, trying to even the value of communication and the value of listening and seeking their input is crucial. And so we put that survey together, and we're able to then go through hours and hours of processing and digesting the information of what we received, and then we tried to put it into a means by which we could go back and say, hey, this is what we've learned about what's happening. What else do you have to say about this? Is this what we are truly learning? And then what can we do about it? And what are some of your recommendations and thoughts about what we can do about it? And through there, we were able to implement a number of things that we are continuing to try, and then just continuing to go back and look and talk to people and really try to make a difference in this area.
You gotta just give us one example, something that they asked for that you came up with. What was one intervention?
Yeah, just one simple example is communication. Is there was this need to find out what's happening, what is going on, and so one simple thing that we did was decided, okay, we are going to have a weekly update of simple bullet points of what's happening at different levels of our department. And we are going to keep everyone abreast by that every week. And so it removes some of the ambiguity or some of the questions that people are, hey, what's going on here? And why isn't this happening? Or why is this happening? And one of the things that we have in that communication with every week, this document that we're sending via email is a positivity report. And what that is, it's a venue for people to give shout outs to anybody in the department and thank yous for what they're doing well and that we're grateful for, and especially highlighting the values that our department has determined are important values to us. So we'll have the positivity report where somebody gets named, personally, and then try to link how that fits into one of our core values. And that's been very, very well received. And again, it's really in keeping with what we know from the literature of systems management, right? Is that it's not necessarily that people want more money, but they want to be recognized, and that also they want to be heard and valued. And so, trying to really express gratitude and value for what people are doing. That's just one simple example of something that we have.
Yeah, I love that. One of the practices that started with COVID was the idea of a check-in. Like who do you need to check in? Your grandma, who's most vulnerable, your friend, your neighbor that you haven't seen in a while. Just the idea of checking in on people. And
Yep.
And I think that there's something about that, especially when you're in sort of isolation, just a check-in, someone asking, "Hey, how are you doing?" And actually listening, paying attention and meaning it. So for you to even ask the question, "What can we do?" That was helpful. And then the idea of gratitude, of, communication that reduces uncertainty. So when people are focused on negative or are unsure of things, they'll be able to articulate some what is sure, what you do know, and then the idea of being grateful for things. That there's a mental shift. I'm talking about mental health. That it's hard to be grateful and anxious at the same time.
Yep.
Like if uh, my father-in-law said to me the other day, he's like, I'm just counting my blessings, but there's something to that when you spend the time thinking about what you're grateful for, it does lift your mental health and your outlook and your perspective. And both challenging things and good things are a part of every single day that we face. The question is, what are you focused on? So that's I love that example that you're doing that. And we are seeing this workplace crisis. So this is not just a healthcare crisis. I'm seeing principals,
Yep.
leaving school, teachers. We're seeing, pastors, people in ministry, anybody who's in like a service kind of industry right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They made it through and they've been taking care. I love your idea of healthy healers, because I've also heard, caring for the caregiver, that if you're on the front lines caring for someone else, that who's caring for you, and are you
Right.
getting the same kind of care? And at some point, like, you realize if we don't have people caring for people, we're not gonna be able to take care of the patient. It reminds me of, did you see the new Top Gun movie yet?
Yeah.
Maverick?
I saw it last weekend.
Okay. So I guess it's not new here in September, but yeah. So he's like, we gotta, accomplish the mission, and we got to bring everybody back home.
Yep.
Both and it's not one or the other. And I think so many of us, whether it's taking care of the patient, or the congregation member or the student, whatever. If you're in a service industry, and a lot of people are listening, they are purposeful leaders, so they're in kind of service industries. You realize that there's the mission, there's the person you're taking care of, but if you don't have the team, you don't have the culture, that you're not going to be able to take care of those people. So I think this is a huge shift, post-pandemic leadership lesson, that taking care of the team, making sure that the healers are healthy, including yourself, but team checking in on one another is as important as what you're doing on the front lines to people. Because if we don't take care of that, we're not going to be here to take care of anybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think you also identified, like what you were discussing there is those of us who are in the helping profession, service profession,
yeah,
tend to be folks who have some degree of empathy, right? And that is both a blessing and a curse.
that's right.
So part of the curse is that we tend to more heavily take on someone's suffering and feel that and experience that ourselves, with as opposed to somebody who is not as empathetic, or maybe isn't in a service profession, but maybe in some other type of profession. And that can cause us, what we know now and what we're actually learning is it actually causes significant um, bodily and harm in the brain, that we carry that around, which can be when you take brain images, and if
Mm.
it's somebody who is actually experiencing the physical trauma of some problem, uh, that when they take brain images of somebody who is hearing, that experience of a person who is experienced significant trauma, the same brain regions are lighting up in the brain. And
Yeah,
when that's happening over and over, especially during time of crisis, like
that's
this COVID crisis that we were experiencing, and you remove the connection that people have with one another, where that's sort of a safety valve, where we're able to actually, when we're experiencing, share that with someone else and they can help carry it. We don't have that. And that puts us at even, and has put us at even greater risk. And so therefore you do see people who are even there, who become physically drained or at greater risk for heart attack or other problems because of this. And people are dropping out of the workforce because they just can't bear it anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And this is the workplace crisis. It really is.
Yep.
Some people are leaving for purpose. Some people are saying, you know what, I don't want to check the box anymore. Life is short. I lost somebody close to me. I'm going to use whatever time I have. That's my story from when I was a kid. I'm going to use whatever time I have to make a difference. Some people are coming out of COVID and changing work because of that. They're going to something, but a lot of people are just tapped out. A lot of people survived the crisis itself, and now you call it compassion fatigue, you call it secondhand trauma, call it I took care of everybody else, but now along the way I got wounded, right? I'm struggling, and this is the reality of leading right now. Is we and our teams have experienced some of that, right? So where do we go for help? Where does the doctor go for the doctor? Where does the pastor go to be pastor? Where does the leader go to be led and coached? And that's a big part of why we're doing this podcast, because we want to create a community of people so that you're not alone. And these kind of conversations that say, hey, you're not the only one. If you've been experiencing this, or you're trying to lead a team who's going through that, there's a lot of us out there who are trying to figure this out and look out for one another. But I think the big takeaway is it has to rise on the priority scale of your what you think your job as a leader is. Like taking care of your team, making sure your team is okay, is a top priority. And that might be the direct team you have, or just the culture that you're creating. So I know this is a real passion area of yours. And I thought a couple things here. Now that we're kind of in this stage of the pandemic, what kind of adjustments is the Healthy Healers team starting to make? And then just talk a little bit about just healthy workplace culture. And maybe those are two in the same, but what kind of adjustments is the Healthy Healers taking now that you're not in pandemic mode, you're sort of post-pandemic? And then just healthy workplace culture. What do you think is important about creating that kind of workspace?
Yeah. So the world's changed, right? The world now is different than it was 2 years ago. Okay.
In case people missed that, newsflash, it's different.
Exactly. In case,
And guess what? We're not going back.
and we're not going back. Right. The genie is out of the box, if you will.
Right.
And it's not getting back. So the world has changed. And people, like you said, is that a number of people decided that they're just not going to live the way they did before, because life's short and is, full of suffering too.
Right.
And so I am absolutely convinced that those organizations that can solve the problem of burnout and also provide meaning and purpose are the ones that are going to succeed into the future. And so this needs to be a priority for those organizations that want to survive. And because, right, and this is the pitch that I try to make to those across the leaders across my system is, hey, let us at West Virginia University become hospitals. Let us become known as this is the place where you go after you've been burned out, you lost meaning and purpose. This is where you come to find renewal and find that meaning and purpose and connection and belonging. And we see now people coming in to our department who are hungry for that and who sense that that's taking place here. So how are we adjusting? So one of the things that we're trying to do is, help our greater system understand what we've been successful at doing or unsuccessful at doing in our department, and try to make some changes now to the larger group. So the way I look at it is kind of a concentric circles. And so my greatest responsibility and authority is with my own department. Okay. And so once we I think now that we've got good 2 years of doing some things, we've learned some things that can be helpful, that then we can expand to the hospital. And then once we are able to expand some of these things to the hospital, then we're able to expand it to the health system across the state, and then possibly even the state as a whole. So for, the teachers and for the judges and for, the frontline grocery workers, whatever. And then maybe the regions. But anyway, so right now what we're trying to do is help translate some of the things that we've learned internally to go that next step, to have a ripple effect that is going to help more and more people. And, ironically, the more we help more people, the more we're helping ourselves too.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, one of the ways that we're trying to pivot and adjust now.
That's cool. Well, we were talking to CEO, and he said, a third of the strategic plan is people oriented stuff right now. So I think any executive right now who's in leadership has to come to grips with the fact that it's mission and bringing my people home.
Yep.
We got to do both. We got to care for them on the front line, but we got to care for ourselves. We got to be healthy healers.
And if people feel safe and feel that you care about them and you will protect them, it's remarkable what they're willing to do in service, knowing just that. And that's part of creating the right kind of culture. You've heard it before. I don't know who said it, right? But culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Every day.
That is so true.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So that we are talking about creating a good culture. And, one of the reasons why I think you're being successful there at this, and success, I think, looks like taking small pieces of ground over a long period of time, because this is a big challenge. So it's not like you wave a magic wand and everything's okay. We're not saying that, but you are making great progress. And one of the reasons, I think, is because you are committed to enjoy your work. And I know that that's awesome. When we did our one retreat and we were talking about the values, enjoyment was one of the values. Remember that? It was enjoyment.
Yeah.
And I got something I want to end here on. I want to show you this. I did something for you. When I think of enjoyment and you, I think of the mustache. I think of handlebar. So today I wore this T-shirt because it's got a little mustache at the bottom here, right here. Mustache. And then this brought something to my mind. We were walking out of the last. This was the second retreat we did with your department leaders, about 70 of your department leaders, and we asked them, "Hey, I'm leaving today feeling," and I just thought, man, look at these words: hopeful, optimistic. There's grateful, right? Empowered, pumped, ready. So you are having this kind of impact on your department that people are feeling energized and thoughtful. So kudos to you for that. But there was one word on here that snuck in, and I missed it at first, but on the day, on the right-hand side in blue, handlebars right there. And it took me a while, and I realized they're talking about the mustache, right? The mustache. So man, good for you for being the face, literally of enjoyment and bringing wellness and meaning back to a profession that is so valuable and yet, so challenging. So I just want you to know, man, how happy I am about how you're doing and what you're doing there at West Virginia. And a lot of people out there listening today can learn a lot by admitting their own recovery, like we talked about last time, but also looking out for one another. And if we're going to keep helping people, we've got to make sure that we're helping each other as well. Any other closing comments on your side?
Oh gosh, thank you so much for the opportunity to share and have this dialogue. And this has been a wonderful adventure. Like you said, you know me, right? I like to have fun. I like to enjoy what I'm doing, and I get playful. And life is too short not to really connect with people and be playful and be creative. And I think that's one of the secrets to longevity with whatever it is that we're doing. So have fun.
That's great. All right, Jim, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks.
Now we want to land the conversation, the part of the podcast where we prepare you to put this into practice. Well, welcome back to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast. We just heard Dr. Jim Barry talk about health in the workplace, specifically those who are taking care of others. So healthy healthcare workers who take care of other people. And so that's kind of similar to what leaders do in organizations as well, making sure that they're healthy to take care of other people. So one of my first questions is, how do we take a good survey of our team's current state and how they are doing as leaders?
Yeah, great question. First, let me just say that I think this topic is so important because a part of being a leader right now means that you're not just committed to accomplish the mission, but that you're also committed to care for the team that you have. And this is, probably that's always been a great idea. But what we're seeing now is, especially with the workplace challenges, that If we don't care for the people we have, they're not going to be there to care for
Yeah.
the others. So whatever your profession is, you have to realize that you have your targets and your mission that you are called, and a lot of them are very high purpose goals that we all are going after. But if we don't take care of our team, there's going to be nobody to get the mission done. Excuse me. So I think that's a really important topic. And I've been thinking a lot about, our current state, and some changes that we've made to check in on each other. So that's the first one, a check-in. Through the pandemic, this idea of a check-in became important. I remember when it first started, I would check in on my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my grandmother, people who were in more vulnerable positions or friends, so you kind of had this idea of whoever might be hurting, let's just check in with them to make sure that they're doing okay. And I think that that is a practice that's really helpful to keep going, even though that the pandemic is over. So with your team, schedule some check-ins, schedule some times one-on-one or as a group to just check in and say, hey, how are you doing? How are things going with you right now? How are you feeling about the work, the workload we're doing? How are things personally, with your family, at home? How's your health, physically, mentally, all those things. I think a check-in right now is a great practice with the team of people that you lead. And it basically says, listen, I don't just care about the mission. I also care about you. And if we don't have you, we're not getting the mission done. So how are you doing? Right. That kind of taking the time to listen. You mentioned something about great leaders who ask good questions and were curious. You were telling me about that. It's kind of that same thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think sometimes when you're trying to change your culture, it can kind of feel uncomfortable, right? So if you haven't been in a culture before asking those kind of questions, all of a sudden you jump into the deep end and say, please be vulnerable with me. And sometimes it's a little bit hard. But I encourage you, man, this is about leaders, kind of pushing through into new places. And I would say the best leaders that I've always loved to work with are the ones who asked good questions about me, about my life, about my dreams, aspirations, things I'm going after. It makes me feel seen, valued, supported. And so if you find yourself in a place where, man, you've never asked those questions before, it doesn't have to be that deep for someone to feel like, wow, you care about me. Even if it's like, let's say, one of the things that you do really well, we just started the new year of school, right? My son just entered kindergarten. And so just even asking, man, how are you doing with that? I know that's something that's going to be new.
Yeah.
Does wonders. It does wonders.
Yeah. Picking a specific, it doesn't have to be even a formal check-in or a half hour or 1 hour meeting. It could just be remembering something specific about that team member's personal life, family, and asking about that specific relationship or that new thing and that transition they're going through, an aging parent, something like that. Hey, how is your mom doing? How is your son's time at preschool or kindergarten? So checking in with specific things. So check-ins, I think that's one good, taking the pulse of the team. Check-ins, conflict would be the second one. Noticing when conflicts are there, if people are avoiding conflict, but it's sort of brewing under the surface, the more stressful the environments get at work, the more conflicts start to come. So be proactive about dealing with conflict. We talked a little bit about, being a bridge builder and a peacemaker before. So I think you can translate some of those same principles here, but notice it, don't avoid it, handle conflict, watch for it and deal with it. And then the third thing, so check-ins, conflict, and then certainty. Right now, a big part of people's problem is not just their workload. It is a heavier workload because people are leaving work and others are stuck there carrying the load of the work. So there is an additional workload for those who are staying engaged right now. But I think a lot of the weight and anxiety comes from uncertainty. There's so much changing right now. I don't know where this is going. There's a lot of up in the air. I'm spinning a lot of plates. So it's not just the volume of work, it's also the ambiguity that's there.
Mhm.
And so check-ins, conflict, and certainty. The more you can provide clarity about goals, what's really important, what's really our target, and roles, what's really your part in helping us hit that target. I think that can be super helpful for someone who just feels a sea of uncertainty to say, here's what really matters, and here's how I contribute. That focus of clarity can be super helpful right now.
That's great. Goals and roles. I being able to say, man, I have a hold of my handlebars and at least I know the
That's right.
direction I'm heading. You know,
That's right.
it keeps me stable, even if everything around me is a little bit unstable. That
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about joy in the workplace and how that's really important, making the workplace more enjoyable. What are some practical ways that leaders can do that in their workplace?
Yeah, and I love Jim and his comments about that. He's got his handlebar mustache, and he genuinely wants to bring joy into his workplace. So I appreciate that about him, and he's doing a great job with that. One of the things that I've seen to be real helpful right now, and just recapturing some joy, is to connect to your core and to remember the why. Why do you do what you do? Why did you get into that profession? Why did you start that business? Why are you doing that in the first place? Remember the why. We actually do an activity when we do some facilitated sessions where we do pictures and visual explorer, it's called. And so people will select a photograph that is a picture of their purpose. So it may be a picture of someone, the man on the moon, and they talk about adventure. And I got into this because I wanted to explore and create new things, or a mom with the baby, and she'll say, well, I am a mom, but also I'm here because of compassion and empathy, and that's what I want to bring. So remembering why you got into what you're doing or why you're starting that in the first place, I think that's really helpful. When you lose your sense of meaning and purpose, the anxiety really starts to creep in. So connect to that core, remember why. Also, take time to connect with each other. So not just connect to your purpose, but connect to other people, and taking that time either outside of work to spend a little extra time over coffee or hanging out, or integrating that into a team meeting. If you're leading right now and you have a team and you're setting the agenda for the time, take some time to go around and do a mini check-in, or, hey, highs and lows, what was good, what's one good thing that worked for you professionally and personally this week, something like that. Just some time before you get into business and going full speed, just that kind of connection with one another. Actually, the third thing we started to do is actually meals and eating together. We started to bring in food or do it over a table, and having some more of our meetings in times where you're actually, eating. There's something about food that just kind of de-escalates all the pressure you feel, and it just allows you to connect a little bit more. So those are some things that we've started to do, connecting to their purpose, connecting with each other, and bringing some meals into the cookouts and stuff like that. That's helped to just revive some joy in our workplace.
Yeah, love that. You also mentioned that, kind of the other aspect of life, we are human. So we're not just robots that work and input, output, right? Like we are humans. So there's this
Yeah.
spectrum of our life that sometimes we don't really get to fully see. We kind of just go to work, go home, go to sleep, and become a little robotic. So joy is such a big part of that, and remembering why we do things. We have purpose. We're not just robots. The other side of life is that life does contain a little bit of hardship and suffering. And so leadership is hard, and it can even be lonely. So how do we handle hard stuff? How do we build resiliency to kind of get us to the next phase or the next step?
Yeah, so good. I was thinking as you were talking about the robotic thing, go back to that for a sec. Here's one thing that's interesting that I've seen in my life. For people who, myself included, don't feel very joyful all the time, the full spectrum of emotions is actually helpful. Meaning, if you find yourself that you're not willing to deal with the uncomfortable emotions like anger, frustration, bitterness, if you're kind of glossing over that, you actually mute your high end emotions as well. So it's sort of like going from 3D or in color to like a black and white old TV set. Like you just sort of mute your emotions by trying to not go here. You also prevent yourself from going here. So one of the values of dealing with the harder emotions, the uncomfortable emotions, is it actually frees you up to experience the greater emotions like joy as well. So just thought of that as you were talking about, we're not robots, we're human beings, and it's okay, that full spectrum of emotions and helpful and healthy. So, but not all the things are good that we do, meaning easy or simple. Some of the good things are very hard things. And I think this gets kind of the topic of resiliency, like how do you stay in the game over and over again and continue to be able to do hard things? And I think a lot of this comes down to not just workload, not just amount of work, but really your focus. And
Mm.
so much of this becomes about your perspective of what are you really focused on. And if you're always focused on the problems and trying to fix the problems around you and yourself or your team or your organization, if you just become problem focused, what happens is it creates a rut. And evidence-based research is showing that it actually narrows your focus. It triggers your amygdala back in your brain and creates a fight or flight or freeze mentality. So the problem focus actually hijacks your ability to think creatively, optimistically, innovatively, and it kind of gets you into a rut, a mental rut. And
Wow.
instead of just fixing the problem, you actually get fixated on problems. And so your input starts to really define your perspective like that. So I really started to really encouraging people to kind of broaden their perspective and be looking for the things that are working in our leadership training. We call it asset-based thinking. But notice what is working, who is really doing a great job that you can celebrate, right? That you can recognize. And I'm not talking about just positive mental attitude where you just choose to be happy and think happy thoughts. I mean, like, notice the real stuff that's actually working. There's real hard stuff, but there's real good stuff too, right? Helpful things that are working and that you can build off of. And so I kind of use the Pac-Man analogy where, back in the 80s when I was growing up, I loved Pac-Man. And Pac-Man, when he was, chomping those pellets, the ghosts would come and chase after him. And eventually, if the ghost caught him, then the Pac-Man would just sort of like wilt. He'd like, fold over and die. And, you'd lose and you get 3 lives or whatever, and then you'd be done. But there's also this thing on Pac-Man where there's little power pellets right up in the corners. And when Pac-Man would eat the power pellets, then the ghosts turned from whatever their color was to blue, and the Pac-Man could chomp the power pellet or the ghost. And so I think that your perspective is sort of like that. Life is full of things coming at you and all the pellets on the board, and that gets kind of overwhelming. And if you are just focused on the problems or just running away from stuff all the time, eventually it catches up to you, and you don't have the stamina to deal with it. I think a lot of that's what burnout ends up being. But if you choose to focus on what is working and the assets you do have, it's empowering to the point that you sort of marshal your resources, and it gives you the energy and the strength and the mental focus to actually start to chomp down on those problems and make progress. So the situation, the board kind of looks the same of life, but a lot of it has to do with what are you feeding yourself and the perspective you have, and are you recognizing the good things and the good work that people are doing around you in order to go after continually the hard things.
Yeah. It's not about ignoring the problems, but
Oh,
it's
no,
about
no.
nourishing yourself with, yeah,
Yes,
mentally,
yeah.
physically, and emotionally. That's great. Dr. Mike, do you have a couple of maybe like resources that people could read or that would even help them a little bit with some of these practical ways of identifying, themselves as well as their workplace?
Yeah, I've started to read a book recently. I talked last episode about the step study I was in, and I wanted to do something to kind of take a next step for myself. And I started to read this book here, Managing Leadership Anxiety. It came recommended to me. Managing Leadership Anxiety, Yours and Theirs. Really great book on the gap that happens for leaders when you don't really know what to do, but you're supposed to do something. And how do you fill that gap? And he talks about hitting that pause button and really doing an assessment of everything that gets triggered in that gap that you start to learn to deal with. So that's a really helpful one. And also notice Yours and Theirs. It connects you and the team together, because guess what? Everybody has anxieties. Everybody on the team has those same kind of experiences and triggers. So being aware of yourself first, which was essentially the last episode we did, and now thinking about other people and their anxieties and things that get triggered, and when they start to overreact in situations, and really helping to unpack that and get patterns that are productive instead of destructive. So that's a good one. And then we do a lot of our own leadership training. And if anybody's out there who wants some help in this, we have some great material, cohorts that we run, one-on-one coaching that we do. that really helps to people kind of rewire the way you think and see, which changes the way that you feel about situations, but then changes the way that you actually show up for yourself, your team, and your organization.
Yeah, perfect. For those of you who want to work with Dr. Mike or even be a part of a cohort or, work closely like that, you can find more information at highpurposepractice.com. Thank you so much for this conversation, Dr. Mike. Next month, we will be talking a little bit more about networking and building bridges with Jared Arnett. We're talking about this new kind of leader. So someone who can expand organizations, break down silos, bring people together. And so you're going to want to tune in for that.
Gonna be a good one. Don't miss it.
Thanks for listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast. To work with Dr. Mike McCormick, head over to highpurposepractice.com.